Hello, Augustana. Our preaching text for this Sunday is from Acts 15, verses 1 through 18. I'm not going to read the whole lesson. You should read that on your own. Go through it. Basically, it's in three parts. Really an important part of the narrative in Acts chapter 15. This is called the Jerusalem Council. It's a pivot point, a crossroad, as it were, in the early church. And just a couple of things in terms of background information. In Acts chapter 2, which is the day of Pentecost, the Holy Spirit comes down upon the very earliest followers of Jesus. They were all Jews. They were in Jerusalem. And we call Pentecost the birthday of the Christian church. They aren't called Christians yet until chapter 11 in Acts, but just for the sake of this conversation, that's what I'm saying. And so begins the process of that promise being fulfilled that they will be witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. In chapter 8, Stephen is martyred. We heard last week in chapter 10 the visit with Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch, and what happens as the message of Jesus spreads out like ripples from Jerusalem. The other thing that's important is that there are actually two Pentecosts in Acts. The second one is in chapter 10 when the Gentiles receive the Holy Spirit, and that is important for what we're going to talk about today. In Acts chapter 10, right at the end of the chapter, verses 44 through the end of the chapter, you can read about that, where the Holy Spirit comes down upon the Gentiles, and Peter recognizes this fact and says, can anyone withhold the water for baptizing these people who have received the Holy Spirit, just as we have? These people being the Gentiles. When he says we have, Peter's referring to the Jewish followers of Jesus. So you have now Gentiles who are receiving the message of Christ, and in Acts 15, the issue comes to a forefront because there were certain individuals, Jewish individuals from Judea, who showed up now in Antioch. That's where Paul is right now in chapter 15. And they say, unless you are circumcised according to the custom of Moses, you cannot be saved. And so this very large question comes to the forefront of what is required of salvation. And the main issue is, for the Gentiles, the non-Jews, what these folks are saying, these certain individuals are saying that you have to be circumcised and you have to be obedient to the law of Moses in order to be saved. In other words, you have to become a Jew before you can become a Christian. All the first believers were Jews, and so they're trying to work their way through and understand what does it mean that Jesus is the Messiah and that salvation is through him alone and not through the law of Moses, not through circumcision, not through being obedient to the law of Moses. And so what happens here, when they say this, Paul and Barnabas, remember Paul, who was a Pharisee, meets the resurrected Christ on the Damascus Road, and he does a 180 from being someone who persecutes the church to someone who's proclaiming the gospel of Jesus Christ. So Paul and Barnabas have what says no small dissension and debate with these folks. It's basically an argument, a good church fight. Paul and Barnabas and some other ones are then sent back to Jerusalem, which is where the mothership is. That's where the church originates, where all the apostles and the disciples are. They send them to Jerusalem, and they take up this question of how does salvation happen? Do they have to become Jews before they can become Christians, these Gentiles? Do they have to be circumcised? Do they have to be obedient to the law of Moses? And so in verse 6 it says, the apostles and the elders met together to consider this matter. And after much debate, Peter stands up and says, my brothers, you know that in the early days God made a choice among you that I should be the one through whom the Gentiles would hear the message of the good news and become believers. And God, who knows the human heart, testified to them by giving them the Holy Spirit, just as he did to us, and cleansing their hearts by faith. He has made no distinction between them and us. Now therefore, why are you putting God to the test by placing on the neck of the disciples a yoke that neither our ancestors nor we have been able to bear. On the contrary, we believe that we will be saved through the grace of the Lord Jesus, just as they will. So, the question is posed. They debate it, they talk about it, they listen to what God is doing, they listen to the Holy Spirit. Peter, the leader of the church, gets up and says, look, the Gentiles have received the Holy Spirit in the same way that we have. Why should there be a distinction between them and us? We believe that they will be saved by the grace of the Lord Jesus, just as we will. And that's the decision that's made at the Jerusalem Council. And then the assembly continues through verse 18. They continued to get together. They listened to Paul and Barnabas as they tell of all the signs and wonders that God has done. And our reading finishes with an affirmation of this really big decision the early church has to make about whether Gentiles have to become Jews before they can become followers of Jesus. And of course, the decision is they don't have to. And this difficulty with this theological matter continues to play itself out over the years of the church. But what is cool about this text to me, and what's interesting is how they gather together, they listen to each other, they talk, they discuss, but through it all, the Holy Spirit is leading them and directing them and guiding them. And they're also remembering and lifting up what God has done in their midst. They talk about how God has been at work amongst them, and they use that as a way to help make this decision going forward, that it's through Christ alone that salvation comes, not through the works or obedience to the law of Moses. And this is a pivotal moment in the church, and it's a text that speaks to me about how the church handles transition and change, and how it's important for us when we're at a crossroad, when we're in a moment of transition and change, whether it's as individuals or a church body like Augustana is right now, that we listen to the direction and the promise of the Holy Spirit, and that we keep this core message, the main thing. That is in verse 11 when Peter says, we believe that we will be saved through the grace of the Lord Jesus, just as they will. And that is the heart of the gospel message. That's the main thing. Interesting reading. I encourage you to read all of chapter 15. The whole book of Acts, the narrative is just a wonderful story of how the Holy Spirit gives birth to the church and how that church spreads like ripples throughout the whole Mediterranean basin. And so I would commend all of Acts to you for your reading and edification. Thanks for tuning in. See you on Sunday morning. Bye-bye.